So, hello everyone, and welcome to Keep the Funding Flowing, How to Create Systems That Drive Grant Renewals. I definitely see a couple of familiar faces in the Zoom room, which is super exciting to see. But for any of our first timers, this is a free grant workshop from Instrumentl. Instrumentl is the most loved all-in-one grants platform for grant prospecting, tracking, and management, which we'll be talking about today. We currently help more than 4,000 nonprofits and grant consultants save time in finding and applying for more grants. And I'll introduce our very special guest in just a second, but before we get into the content, I want to take a second to share the results of our poll. So, if folks can see on their screen right now, we've got a lot of regulars in the room. So, if any of those regulars have any comments or things they'd like to share with some of our newcomers, I would love to see that. It looks like a lot of folks are holding steady or working on it in terms of their current grant management processes. So, our special guest will definitely help us kind of illuminate and come up with a few new ideas for that process. I see a couple of folks are pretty dialed in. If you folks have any ideas or any suggestions for the rest of our audience today, I'd really encourage you to drop those questions in the chat. And it looks like folks are using a mix of tools and spreadsheets to track their post-award activities, which is something that we'll touch on today. And lastly, we've got a good number of folks in the room that haven't tried Instrumentl before, so today's going to be a great opportunity to do that. And it also looks like we've got quite a few folks that are customers or have had free trials. So in those instances, again, feel free to share your expertise with the rest of the folks in the room today. I'll stop sharing that poll. A couple of FYIs before we really get started today. This event today will be about 60 minutes long. It includes a session from our special guest we'll introduce in just a moment, as well as a live Q&A and a brief Instrumentl demo. Today's session is being recorded, and you'll get information on how to access that recording via email by tomorrow morning. And also, I know that all of us folks, grants management, grant writing, grant renewals, none of this is very easy. All of us are super busy. So I really want to just say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here. If you need to step away at any point, feel free to do so. We'll be right here. The presentation will keep going, and you'll also receive, as I mentioned, a recording of it tomorrow. So don't fret about missing anything. But I would encourage you all to stick around till the very end because Anne's got some great tips for us. To start us off, I'm a part of the Instrumentl team putting the event on today. If you've been to some of our events before, I might start to look a little familiar. My name's Shaylee. I joined Instrumentl back in June, and I'm an events and community manager. So my job is to help develop events like these ones and find really great speakers for our audience to learn from. My background to date has spanned a couple of different industries from publishing to marketing tech, but the major theme in my career has been helping folks who are doing a lot do it with just a little bit more ease. So I hope that some of these tips from Anne today can help you do just that. And I am so excited to introduce today's guest speaker, Anne Kaiser. Anne brings over 25 years of nonprofit leadership experience, from board member to CEO, and that gives her a super unique perspective on leading and funding mission-driven organizations. She's the former CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of the Chippewa Valley and now a sought-after consultant, coach, and grant strategist. As Anne has shared today's content with us, I've come to really admire her strategic thinking and her honestly very calming presence. She helps teams streamline their grant processes without losing their sanity and making it feel super easy to approach. So I'm so excited for her to share her insights with us today.
Thank you, Shaylee. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. And what a kind, wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. I love seeing all these different folks from all across the country. And yeah, I'm in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So, Shaylee, we've got to talk about how you visited here. That's phenomenal. I love it so much. I love it so much. So, yeah, throughout my nonprofit leadership career, I have developed a huge passion around grant funding, and I'm a bit of a geek on the topic. I've been, like Shaylee said, I've been writing grants for over 25 years for organizations of budgets less than 100,000 and over 3 million. So I work with a lot of small to medium size nonprofits. In addition to helping clients in my consulting business, I do strategic planning, leadership development. I have a grant writers cohort, and I help a lot of fundraising development. I've really done a lot of specializing in mentoring and teaching grant writers and helping develop grant systems, because as we're going to learn today, it's super important. So today I'm going to introduce some key factors for you to think about to get those easiest wins with grant renewals. So here's our agenda. I'm confident everybody here is going to learn something. I love seeing the variety of experiences that you all have. But regardless of the sophistication or usability of your current system, I hope you all will come away with two or three really great tools or tips to integrate and make it even better. You know, clearly I'm a big Instrumentl fan or I wouldn't be here. But I have worked with a number of grant management systems, some more loose and informal than others. And I've helped clients develop and integrate a number of different systems that work for them. And that's the key. So today's topic is about finding the factors that you need most and using that knowledge to inform you how to improve your current system. And like I said, even if you integrate one or two new things, you're going to move the needle to improve your funding with renewals. And why do we care about renewals? Well, Elevate is an organization that did a study. They looked at 13,500 different grants. And I love that they separate them out into from general operations and program restricted grants. But if you look at that, your odds of getting a new grant are between 54 to 47 percent. Your odds of getting a renewal are double. It's 92% to 87%. And today, all of us here need that. You need that advantage. So that's why we are focusing on renewals today and how grant management system can help you. So, and maybe these are pain points. We don't have to dwell on this slide a long time, but you know, there are a lot of pain points in grant management, and maybe you have totally missed a report deadline, and that means you are not eligible to apply again in the future. That hurts. Maybe there's unfulfilled funding requirements. You needed a social media post as one of the requirements. You went, oh, shoot, we forgot to tell marketing about that. Or maybe there was certain data or outcomes that you needed to be tracking, and you got it done, but it wasn't the best, right? Or you just get it out there pretty quickly, do a quick program survey, and it's like, shoot, we could have done better to really showcase who we are in our work better. Or what about that missed reapplication cycle? Oh, that just hurts, right? When I have had it happen where I think it was a board member came and said, hey, I see so and so got this funding. We got that in the past. Why aren't we on the list this year? And it was like, oh, I didn't know their application cycle came up again. Or what about staffing changes, right? Their email is the one that got the notice about the report coming up, and that person has left the organization. So it went into a dead email box. It's like, that hurts. So these are all things that we're going to touch on and think about. Maybe you can think about some reasons why maybe you haven't renewed a grant, and then look for the tips that we'll be talking about that will help you get those renewals. We're going to talk first about the basics of an effective system, just so you can kind of get my logic model here as we go along. You need to decide what you need your system to do. You don't need to decide what other people's systems look like. What do you need your system to do? You need clear avenues for communication. Using technology to support process is essential, and hardwiring accountability and support is super important. So, you need tools that let people know what you need from them and when, with plenty of advance notice, so they can integrate that into their work plan. And when everybody has advance notice, you are going to shine your organization's expertise in the best light possible to get those renewals. And that's what we were here about today. So let's go into our first section here, track and manage grants from research to a renewal. Oh, and I forgot to mention a housekeeping item. I love questions. I am going to be looking at questions at the end though. So Shaylee is looking at the chat, but during a later section, I'll be looking through your questions. We've got time for Q&A at the end. So please Um, please throw those questions in there and I will be looking at those. So, what does your organization system need? Well, the first thing we're going to talk about is project planning and workflow. And Shaylee, can you go to that next slide? Thank you. Perfect. So this might seem basic, but you really need to organize past, current, and future grants into a pipeline. And we'll talk about tools, but you really need that one-stop spot to know what have we applied for, what are we currently applying for, what are we going to apply for. And I always want the funding organization, but I also want the opportunity name. Maybe your community foundation, your United Way. Maybe they have multiple grant cycles throughout the year. So that's what I'm talking about with the United, or the opportunity name. And then the funded program. You want to put in here, what program are you asking them to fund? And it's important, like general operations, brilliant, wonderful. You always want that in there. But is it weekend meals? Is it emergency food? Is it emergency housing? So those are the three basic things that I always put in first. And so second, we're going to look at tracking your status and your application deadline. Now, again, when you're tracking these things, it's critical that you keep your terms the same. So these are terms that I love for status. Declined. We applied, we didn't get the funding. Awarded, closed. We were awarded it, we've spent it out, the funding period's done, the reporting's done. That award is closed. Awarded, active. Congratulations, you got the grant. And so the awarded active is you're either actively spending it now or you will be soon. In submitted, I've submitted the grant. Okay. So you've got that submitted there. And then in progress, that's where you're writing them. So you can keep track of what you're actively working on. Qualified, that's a grant that you have found and you said, we are a good fit. Demographics are a good fit, the geographic region, the programs we serve, the funding window, it's all a good fit. So we're qualified and we're going to be funding, or we're going to be applying in the future. And then researched. Research are those grants you found, but maybe you haven't really dialed in on whether you are an exact good fit. So researched is that bunch of grants where you got to get to them, but you don't have a scheduled application date yet. All right. So that's number two. Now, number three, you've got your document, your funding details. So what is the award date if it's been awarded? What's the funding period? When does the funding start? When does it end? Amount requested, amount awarded. So those are the pieces you want to be sure that you're keeping track of these, and you're going to see later how we're going to use that. But these to me are really critical elements to keep track of. And then finally, you want to record that reporting deadline. Why are we here today? We are here today to talk about renewals, and those reporting deadlines are critical. That is a critical element to work into your grant project planning and workflow. It's something you need to prepare for, integrate into your workflow, and we will give others a heads up on what we need from them so they can do their part in fulfilling these requirements. Okay, so that's the 4 parts of our project planning and workflow. Now, here's a nice visual. For those of you who are spreadsheet averse, I apologize because I know just seeing this might make your head spin, but hang in here. You don't have to do anything with it. This is just a really nice visual, and all those key elements are across the top. And here's some examples of how you might use those. So having a document like this has been a game changer for me and my clients, whether it's a spreadsheet that you manually update, or a report that comes from one of your subscription tools that we'll talk about later. This is your source to find upcoming application deadlines so you can integrate those into your 90-day work plan. Okay, and some of you might just went 90-day. I have a 2-week window when I write my grants. I get it. I honestly get it. But I'd encourage you to keep moving those deadlines up, maybe a week at a time, and start working on your grants earlier. It does help lower the stress level considerably. Um, you also here can track funding that's been secured by funding program and by period, right? You see that there. Grant award decisions that you're waiting on, but you can look at what did we apply for? How much do we apply for? Which program? And then obviously those report deadlines that we need to plan for. So I hope this visual gives you a nice overview of why we're looking at these different key elements. The other thing that this is critical to do is to improve your financial management. And you as a grant writer manager might not be responsible for financial management. However, you absolutely can help your accounting and bookkeeping folks. So let's say you just need to track awarded grants by funded organization. Well, you can sort by, or in your report tracker report tool, you can um, look at your status, the award date, the amount awarded, and right there, you know, who did we get funding from and when. Um, Next piece, the second thing that we're going to look at is tracking awarded funding by program. If you need to be able to report to somebody how much funding you've secured for summer camps, or how much funding you've secured for workforce development, then you can easily go to this grant tracker or into a grant management tool, create a report, and this is going to be here. If you don't have a grant management system, you don't have that ability. The other piece to think about here is this also helps you to know what isn't funded. So if you have a STEM camp and there are no grants awarded, you know, oh boy, I better look for funding for that STEM camp because they told me we need $100,000 in funding. So this also helps you to know what to write for. Okay, the next piece under financial management is to project future funding by programming. You look at your grant status, what you've submitted, look at the grant, at the funded program, excuse me, and the amount requested. And you can say to your CEO or your accountant or your board president, yeah, we've written for these grants. And you can even temper it, right? You say, this is a renewal, so we're really likely to get this funding. This is a brand new one. I'm just not sure. But still, it helps you project future funding by program. And then finally, this is a tool to help monitor grant spending by grant deadline. Again, you're looking at that grant status, and then you're looking at that funded period. And obviously, the actual spend out of those grants are going to be tracked by your accountant, your bookkeeper, whatever systems you have there. But I advocate for maybe you and your accountant sits down once a month and you just go through your grant tracker to make sure, okay, did you know this has been awarded and our funding period started, or the funding period is going to start, or hey, this funding period is ending. Have we submitted all the expenses for it? That can be huge. Again, why do we care about this for renewals? Because if you spend out your grant well within the allowable expenses and within that projected time period, you are much more likely to get funded again. So you'll qualify for that reapplication. Okay, so we're wrapping up this first section. And on the right here, you're going to see all those different funding elements that I think are really critical to track in your grant management system. And take a look at these and consider which ones you currently have and which ones maybe you don't, and how they could impact or help your project planning and workflow. Oh, and by the way, here's a quick win. Something that I've gotten into the habit of doing after missing a couple reapplication cycles. After I hit submit, I automatically reschedule that again in the future for a year from now. So if ABC Corporation had their corporate funding cycle for STEM camps for kids, and I just submitted that, I am going to, a year from now, put that same funder in there and that funding application for a year from today's date, because then it is in your cycle and you are far less likely to miss it. Now, I know that maybe new funding guidelines and deadlines aren't published yet. They might change. But if I have this on my tracker, I know I need to be looking for ABC Corporation funding notifications, and I need to set aside time to write it as it comes out. Because every once in a while, we all know some of these notifications come out and you don't have a lot of time to write them. So this is a really good way to make sure that you can integrate this into your work plan. And if we don't get the funding or we find out we don't qualify, we can always take it out, right? You can always take it off your grant tracker. But if it's there, you are far less likely to miss that reapplication the next time around. All right, next section. We're going to talk about streamlining communication and collaboration. And why do we care about streamlining communication and collaboration? Do you ever feel like you are the center of your organization's grant universe? And sometimes you really wish you did not get that kind of attention, right? So you might be the only person in the organization or one of a handful of people who are tasked with staying on top of grant management. So if there is a question, you're the one who's asked. If someone needs to know a detail about the funding, how to spend it, when to spend it, all those good things, you're the person that gets the call, the text, the Teams message, the email, or somebody pops into your office door. And if a requirement gets missed, you are the one that's on the hot seat. So wouldn't it be lovely if there were hardwired systems that would help share the information and the responsibility, and all of that required less time of you, right? I think that would be quite lovely. So here are some things why communication and collaboration are important to think about. We all know grants involve multiple contributors, whether you're writing them or implementing them or reporting on them. They require timely responses. You're always operating on a deadline. Well, if that deadline's 3 months down the road, it's still a hard deadline that everybody has to meet. And you need everybody on the same page to develop accurate, consistent proposals, as well as to fulfill your obligation to the funder. So again, my mantra, you need tools that let people know what you need from them and when, with plenty of advance notice, so they can integrate those tasks into their work plan, and they can show the work that you are doing in the very best light possible, and you're much more likely to get refunded. So let's look at, I've put together two different things here, but this is a concept that I just love. And I developed the Confident Grant Writers Learning Cohort, and we've developed a lot of tools and templates like this. But these are things that make information accessible to everybody involved when they need it. So Grant Implementation Guide is a shared document, and it includes the data, expense, recognition requirements, whatever you need to track, and it assigns responsibility and timeline. Now, on the right-hand side here, I've listed some of those possible things that might need to be in your grant implementation guide. Things that, again, this needs to be customizable for every grant that you do, but you generally need to know, okay, how do we fulfill these requirements? How do we spend out this money correctly? So this is what you're looking for. Now, this next slide it's a little bit of a mashup, but hang in there with me. And I realize it might be super small and really hard for you to read, but when you get the recording and the slides, you can dig deeper into this. So here's an example of a grant implementation guideline. That first section is the basic grant information that you need people to know. Who's the funder? What program is it funding? When's the funding period? How much were we awarded? Those kind of things. And then it'll include the grant budget, because the program manager, the accountant, everybody needs to know. So what are we spending this money on? So if we got equipment, then I can make sure I go and buy that equipment. The middle section tends to be about what are the deliverables that we promise them, excuse me, what are the deliverables we promise them, and what are the recognition requirements? What are the evaluation requirements? So this is our middle section. And then the bottom section is the responsibilities and the timeline. So this is where you say, here are the tasks that have to be done. Here's who needs to do them. and here's when they're due. And sometimes folks like to have that status in there as well. So this is where there's that accountability and support that I mentioned at the very top, because you need to have supportive accountability, but folks need to know that others know that they're responsible for something and that people are relying on them to get this done. Now, to take a step back, clearly this is a system and a process that needs advanced training and buy-in. However, this is received well because it lays things out in advance, and then folks can decide how and when they will integrate this into their own processes. They know what's expected of them in advance and when it's due. I've been far too guilty of emailing somebody at the last minute for demographics or program data or an expense report. My lack of planning creates a crisis for them. That doesn't lead to a great work culture. So this is a great way to create efficiency in a great work environment. And again, this is a template that you develop, you customize it for every grant that you do based on what are the requirements for fulfilling this grant. Now, we're going to take this same concept and we're going to use it for reporting. So you will use this same concept. And Shaylee, can you click to the next slide? Thank you. You will create a grant report template. Again, that is a shared document. It lists the report questions. It lists any things that they are requiring from us, and it assigns that responsibility and deadline. And again, when you look on the right-hand side here, these are just some sample things that grant reports might look for. But again, this is something that you customize. So, program folks never like to be asked for outcomes when they didn't know they were supposed to be tracking them. Marketing folks never like to know about a social media requirement after the program has ended. So this helps give everybody a heads up on what they need to know and really reduces those last minute urgent requests. Okay, we'll take another look at this. This is another mashup. And again, folks who are part of my Confident Grant Writer series, we have this as part of the membership, you get these templates, but I wanted to give you guys an idea of what this could look like if you wanted to develop your own. So again, this first section lays out, okay, wait, who is this funder? How much did they give us? What program were they funding? Because again, all the people that are contributing to this aren't in it every day. And then it lists out the report questions that we need to answer. It lists out what are the requirements. Is there recognition? Is there outcomes tracking? Is there data tracking? And again, finally, the bottom section here, it lists all those responsibilities, all those tasks, who's responsible and when it is needed by. Okay, so again, this is a great thing. Then you've already put together the grant implementation guide. So this report template is going to help you get much closer to the finish line by having this complete and on-time grant report. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a vision of what could be. And here's another quick win. Again, I love shared resources. In your shared folders, if you create, let's say you do it under grants, and then under foundations, you create a folder for every single foundation that you ask money from. Just the one, even you submit, whether you're awarded or not. You create a folder for that funder, and then you create subfolders for each year that you're applying. And in every one of those subfolders are all the documents that go into making that application, all the documents, maybe it's your implementation template that lives there, maybe that's where the program photos get dumped. Maybe that's where the social media posts get put, so that when you are putting everything together, or when you're required to do a task, you know exactly where to put this into this shared folder. And then when you go to write for this grant in 2026, do you know how much fun it is to be able to go to that 2025 folder or 2024 and go, oh, yeah, that's what we asked for. Or, oh, yeah, I can copy and paste this question that they asked because it's the same this year, or I can tweak it. This is brilliant. It's super helpful. You aren't searching for the materials from last year's application. Everything is right at your fingertips. So I hope that this is a quick win too. Another tool that can help you, regardless of what your actual grant management system looks like. This is something that can maybe really help you. So now we're rolling into our last section, building a process that supports long-term grants to sustainability and that your organization will implement. Will it actually be used by the people in your organization? That is key. Now, I want to just take a pause and encourage you to look for the top handful of items that are doable for you to implement to improve your system in the short term. Now, if you want to develop a long-term solution and you want to overhaul your system, that's something that is going to require a lot of other folks. It's going to require a lot of other resources, a lot of time. Do I believe it's worth it? Absolutely. And again, just that statistic of getting a renewal doubles your chance of being funded. It's absolutely worth your time. But I really want this to be one of those workshops where you take away a handful of things and you say, okay, here's something we can implement short term. And here's some long-term goals I have, and let's get folks together for it. But I just don't want this to be a workshop where you learn a lot of stuff and you walk away and go, well, that's not going to change how I work. So I wanted you to be, just be looking for those one or two things that you can do. And here's where we're going to talk about different tools and different systems. And I know someone was asking a question about that earlier. So let's take a look. On the right-hand side here, I've listed factors that I use to consider whether a grant management system is a good fit for our organization. Cost is absolutely a factor, and I know a lot of you are really operating in difficult financial services and or circumstances, excuse me. My heart goes out to you. That said, if there isn't a tool that is going to increase your efficiency, increase your ability to get grants, save you time, maybe you'll be able to write more grants. I think that's worth investing in. And I have found in multiple organizations that there are organizational leaders, board members, even donors who are willing to invest in those systems. So please don't let cost be an automatic no for you. Okay, you're definitely going to have to make your case for support though. But is this system user friendly? Some of us, I know we have systems where it's like, well, it's a great system, but it takes too long to learn how to use it. Multiple people have to get in it. They don't have the time to learn how to use it. It's not user friendly. I love, love, love push notifications because it comes to you. It absolutely comes to you and says, oh, yeah, it's a reminder. I got to get on that. And system integration. That's why I like things that come into my email inbox or that come into my task list. I love those kind of things because then those push notifications, or excuse me, those system integrations, I don't have to take the time to go into another application to get to it. And again, access by stakeholders is really important as well, obviously. And are there other factors? We can talk about that in the Q&A as well. But here's another quick win. Create evergreen email addresses to keep, oh, sorry about that, Shaylee. Keep information flowing by using these evergreen email addresses. So then when people change, these email addresses are evergreen and they follow the function, not the person. So then if a report due date comes out with a link to say, hey, here's the link to the report, it's due in a month, it isn't going into an email that isn't being monitored. So yes, love, love, love evergreen emails. All right, so let's start looking at some of our options for tools. We've got your basic spreadsheet and plenty of my clients use them, a basic grant tracker. lower no cost, right? And it's in general, it's user friendly if you like spreadsheets, or if you have somebody in your organization that can help you develop a spreadsheet that works for you. It's something you're already using. It can be accessed by all stakeholders. So it's really an easy tool to use. And again, we'll go back and take a look at that other grant tracker spreadsheet. If we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Shaylee. This is your grant tracker spreadsheet example. You would sort the columns to prioritize the information you need. Do you need to sort it by the funding organization? Do you need to sort it by the funded program, by the status? If you're looking for, wait, which grants am I supposed to be working on right now? You focus here, you track by status and look for those submitted and qualified that you're going to be writing, or excuse me, in progress and qualified. A couple of hints. You can track your declined. I track my declined and awarded closed in a separate tab using the same format, but I never delete them. And folks are like, why not delete them? Well, take them off the active sheet because yes, it just gets to be a lot to look at. But I periodically will go back to those declined or those awarded closed. And I'll take a look at, gee, should we apply for them again now? Have our circumstances or their guidelines changed where maybe we'll qualify for them? Or if somebody says, why haven't we ever applied for XYZ Corporation? You can go back and look and say, yeah, we applied and we were declined. So always good to have. The other thing is I tend to track my research grants in another separate tab. So then they aren't in this active grant tracker. But I have to remind myself every month, 2 months, 3 months to go look at those researched grants to qualify them and see if I should bring them into my active grant tracker. Now we're going to see that there are other tools that are going to do a lot of that integration seamlessly for us. But if you use a spreadsheet or want to use a spreadsheet, these are just some tips that you can use. Okay, let's look at our next tool option. Have you ever thought about using calendar events or tasks to help for shared accountability? And that's part of your grant management system. So let's say we are applying for a grant and I need certain things to be done by other people in the organization. I can break down those tasks and those deadlines and send those out to folks so that it lands in their calendar, in their email inbox, and then they know what they need to do. Again, lower no cost, user friendly. It's usually something people are using anyway. Advantage of push notifications. It's system integrated. They're tools you're already using and it can be accessed by all stakeholders. So let's take a look at some examples. And again, I'm going to apologize. This might be hard to read on your screen. But when you get the slides, you can dig into these further. But on the left is an application that's due. And so I'm sending out an email to the folks that I need things from. I need a budget from the CFO. I need a letter of support for a board president. I need a logic model from our COO. And so I send this out and it has, this is the date I need these things from you. And as you'll see, I set a reminder for 4 weeks ahead. And so again, this at least gets it in front of them if they use their calendar tasks. And on the right is the example of how you can use calendar events and tasks for a reporting deadline. And again, I've chosen to do one reminder for all the different people. And you can see down at the very bottom in the details, I've said, here's what I need from all these different people. You could send out a separate reminder for each person. However, I want to be, I like this idea of shared accountability, like we talked about before. People know that people are relying on them, and it's just human nature. You tend to be like, okay, there's accountability built in. I got to get this done. Okay, so that's how you can use calendar events and tasks. Next, we'll look at Microsoft Project, or maybe there's another project management tool that you love. I tend to use Microsoft Project because it's one that's many of my clients already have and already use. And so this way, again, lower no cost, right? User friendly, you get push notifications. It's integrated into your system potentially. Everybody can access it. One organization that I worked with, they used project or Microsoft Planner for other projects. So adding in grants wasn't a big leap for them. And it's so nice because you have those push notifications, you have a dashboard view, you have deadlines that are pushed out, you can assign responsibility. So again, in this slide that's hard to read, but you could get an idea of it. Here's an example of what Microsoft Project would look like. On the left-hand side, each of those columns is a separate grant. And this is basically grant implementation and reporting tasks that need to be done for this grant. So when it's awarded, I sit down and I break down all of these tasks and I assign them. And then the middle one, when folks click into their task, you can provide more detail on what's needed. You can even provide a link back to the application deadline, one of your other tools that you use. And then the right-hand side is the example of an email that comes into your inbox and says, hey, here's your tasks coming up. This one is 7 days overdue. This one is due in 6 days. A really nice tool. But again, project planning tools can be a really nice tool for you. Next, we're going to look at donor databases. And I don't have an example for you here. We're in the home stretch here. I got to wrap. But your donor database might have the ability for you to do grant management within it. And you might have the ability to assign tasks to get notifications. Basically, you're treating a grant funder like a donor, but some donor database or CRMs have grant management tool within them. So maybe you want to look at that. If you have a donor database that you love and that people actually use, maybe that's a good way to use that as part of your grant management system. And then finally, are your grant management products. I clearly am a fan of Instrumentl. One of the things I love the most about it is it integrates really high level research with all these other tasks so it gets into my pipeline. But again, you have a dashboard, you get push notifications. There is a learning curve. To me, it feels very intuitive. And most of these grant products are really intuitive because they're integrating common CRM um, standards, standard practices. So they're pretty intuitive. The learning curve isn't really high. You get, though, what I love is the automation, the integration, the reporting capabilities, all those good things are all integrated into there. So now I'm going to hand this off to Shaylee because she is going to talk more about Instrumentl, and then I'll be back to answer questions.
Absolutely, folks. I know we've been doing a really wonderful job of asking plenty of questions in the chat already, but as I walk through this, if you have those questions for Anne, she'll be back in about 7 minutes to answer them. But what I'd love for all of us to do now is get hands-on. So Anne has talked us through some really wonderful tactics for grant management, which can be applied across a variety of tools and resources, but I'm here to demonstrate what it looks like in Instrumentl. And I'd love for you folks to actually follow along. I know I saw about half of the room hadn't tried Instrumentl before, so I'll drop a link in the chat for anyone new to dive in with us. Feel free to click on that link, and if you're already an Instrumentl user or already an Instrumentl customer, feel free to open up the platform. For those of you that are joining us today, please make sure you open up this link specifically because it'll allow you to get access to our platform right away. And again, I just want to mention that we'll be talking about grant management features in Instrumentl, but at the very least, in this walkthrough, what you'll get from me is a list of good fit funders. It looks like folks might be having a hard time seeing my video. So I will bring myself back onto the screen. Hopefully that looks better for folks. But again, walk through this with me and you will leave, again, at the very least, the list of good fit funders and at the very best, some really cool ideas to incorporate into your grant management practices, whether you're using Instrumentl or not. So again, as folks fill out that link, or if you're following along with me, you'll be asked some very basic information about your organization to get you started. Should take about 30 seconds. For folks in the room who have used Instrumentl before or are looking to extend or reactivate this trial, you can follow along with me for today, but also fill out this form to see how that extension goes. I'll share our workshop link one more time just so folks can follow along with me. Once you fill out that first form, you'll get to this page which lets you book a call with one of our grant advisors. Because I'm here with you and we're live and we're walking you through the process and we want to see some of Anne's tips live and in action, you have the option to skip this kickoff call right now. That'll only be for the duration of this event. So again, feel free to follow along and join me. Now I'm actually going to take us out of this PowerPoint and transition us into the Instrumentl platform. For those of you who are following along with me, you should land on a page that looks like this. Here we'll start by creating a project. So first thing we're going to do is give our project a name. And I want to clarify that in Instrumentl, to use the platform successfully, like Anne mentioned, every platform has a learning curve. The thing that we're referring to when we say a project is a specific activity that we're searching for funding for. So in my example, the specific activity I'm searching for funding for is a STEM Access Lab for girls of color. Next, we'll walk through exactly what we're finding that fundraising for, right? So this can be the mission statement you have listed on your site. It can be a brief project description you've written out for your leadership team, or it can simply be a 3-sentence answer that answers these bottom bullets: what you do, who you serve, and your intended outcomes and impact. And again, if folks are following along with me, this is one of my favorite parts. If you click Generate Keywords Suggestions, Instrumentl will use AI to analyze your description and pull the most relevant keywords that it can. So in just a couple of moments, those will pop up on my screen. We recommend selecting 2 to 5 best fit keywords just so that our search can be populated the most effectively. For my program, I'm going to select after school, women and girls, and STEM/STEAM education. Next, we'll label the project lead. So I'll be the project lead for today's example. And lastly, our project type. Because we're talking both about grant management, and I mentioned that we are all going to walk away with that list of good fit funders, we want to select matches and tracking. So this will allow you to get new grant recommendations as well as find some of those tracking features. If by chance you're an existing Instrumentl user and you only want to do the tracking portion of today's workshop, we'll select tracking. But I'd recommend doing matches and tracking just so we're all on the same page. Next, we will head to filling out a couple of more details about our matches setup. We'll start by our applicant type. So I know my organization is a nonprofit, but you might be a nonprofit that's partnering with a couple of different businesses or a couple of different institutions. Here is exactly where you tell us that information. Currently, I'm not looking for grants that are specifically for faith-based organizations, but if that is something you're interested in, this is where you let us know. And my project is going to serve in Boston, Massachusetts. So that'll be a specific county, Suffolk County, that I can go ahead and add. If your project is going to serve multiple counties, then you can select multiple counties at this stage. Evelyn, I hope that was a woohoo for Suffolk County. um, and next, I'm looking for grants that are in between 50K and 250K. So this is where all of the matches that I'm receiving, they'll all be between these two amounts, and I won't be shown anything that does not fit in here. I'm planning on using these funds for our project and program that I specifically outlined, but you might be looking for funds for general operating expenses. I know Anne mentioned those earlier. You might be looking to do some education about your nonprofit, or maybe you're looking to train your team, depending on what your goals are for the activity that you're seeking funding for. That'll determine how you answer this question here. And lastly, right now and today, I think I'd like to see grants from associations, from corporate sources, and from private sources at the moment. So with that, I will click Save and Exit. Again, Rachel just redropped that link, that workshop link for us all, which is very helpful. Thank you, Rachel. Feel free to open it up and walk through this with me, or at least keep the link open and revisit after the call today if you're tuning in. So right now, we are being matched to relevant funders and projects for our program. As this loads, this is like my favorite part, the way it shows you all the numbers that pop up on your screen. It looks like Instrumental's found 273 grants for me. So that's 200 foundation grants, 67 corporate grants, and I've opted out of government grants for the day. So let's take a look at what these grants look like in Instrumental before we dive right back into how we can track them all effectively. I'll start by clicking this first one. So the first grant that it's shown me is F5 STEM Education and AI Grants for Women and Girls of Color. Looks like it's got a deadline early next year. Perfect for me. And then I'll slide over to the other half of my screen. I'm zoomed in, so hopefully you folks can follow along and see what I'm looking at. We'll start with a couple of overview details about the opportunity. We've got things like background, details about the grant, eligibility requirements, preferences, all in one place. Next, if I click into the Funder tab, I can actually see a couple of different pieces of information about their 990. It looks like we might be having a little bit of a bug with that grant, so I'll select a different one. Let's take a look at Advancing Girls Fund. Sorry about that, folks. We've got our Advancing Girls Fund. Same thing here. We're going to be able to see that 990 snapshot. We're going to be able to see an overview, their priorities. And then when I switch into the Funder 990 report, we're going to be able to see all of that really powerful information that's in a 990 form laid out super nicely in a way that's pretty easy to parse right over here. Some of my favorite sections include key people, so I know who to make connections with, key financial stats, so I can understand their giving breakdown, and their median grant amount, so I can make sure it's aligned with what I'm looking for. As I move through this opportunity, I can take a look and see, where the past grantees were, the purpose of those grants, looking at those NTEE forms, and their openness to new grantees. So it looks like they're slightly open, but again, most awards going to repeat grantees, which is exactly what we're talking about today. So with that, I might leave a couple of notes for my team. I might say something like, hey, great fit, not looking for new grantees very strongly. Stringly, if I can type right, strongly. And I might leave my initials as well, so anyone looking at my tracker can see who those notes are coming from. Next, I'll click Save, and I want to zoom out just so you can see what happens when I click Save. Once I click Save, you'll notice this grant disappeared from the left-hand side of my screen and this tracker number came to 1. So this is what your grant management tracker is going to look like in Instrumental. And we can incorporate a lot of those tips and tricks that Anne mentioned directly into our platform. Quickly, just from this page, we can see that we've got that status button, and you can add custom fields here. So you can see, whether you're researching a grant or where in the application phase you are. I'll take us back to our slides so I can walk through in more detail some of these specific grant management features pretty quickly because Anne will be on in just a minute to wrap up our presentation and give us a live Q&A. So in Instrumental, you guys saw that I just highlighted those grant statuses. She walked us through the basics of an effective system today. So that's organizing opportunities and tracking details. And grouping grants by those statuses takes that even further. You can see exactly where each opportunity stands and what actions are needed to keep the momentum going, especially when you're managing multiple grants. And once you've tracked a grant as awarded in Instrumental, so if I went back to that screen, change the status to awarded, you'd get spend down features. So the idea with the spend down feature in Instrumental is that the interface is super clear and super simple. There are high level visuals that give you or your leadership, your board, or your boss easy visibility into where that award money is going and how it's progressing over time. This spend down feature or this budgeting feature is specifically focused on grants, which is what it's built for. So it's designed to track what folks in this room need to know the most. And it's also very easy to set up. Earlier, Anne also emphasized quick wins like scheduling next year's application right after you hit submit. The calendar view in Instrumental makes this proactive simple habit even more simple. So every deadline and reporting requirement can be tracked within Instrumental so that nothing falls through the cracks. But if you've got multiple teams like finance and programs and development, and a lot of folks might not be in Instrumental directly, we do have several different calendar integrations. So those deadlines that you're putting into Instrumental can be shown and surfaced on people's calendars across your team. And finally, and stressed that funders value that timely and accurate communication. These reports that you can pull from Instrumentl make that really seamless. And to wrap us up for the afternoon, I'd love to pass it back to Anne so that she can emphasize why a great grant tracking system is really so important, right before we head into our questions.
All right, thank you, Shaylee. And I hope you all have found some valuable tips and tricks and things here. And hopefully these things that we've talked about will help you avoid those common missteps and help you meet those report deadlines, fulfill your requirements, submit in the next cycle. Wow. And then survive staffing changes. So yeah, questions. There were a few questions that I found in the chat that I'm going to address real quickly. And Shaylee, I guess if there's more that come up, if you could let me know.
Absolutely.
Someone asked, and I forgot to write your name down. I'm so sorry about LOIs. Yes, I will track an LOI, a letter of intent. Absolutely. I That's important to the process. So yes, I appreciate that distinction. And someone else asked about what do you think about short program reports during the interim period? I love them. And I I appreciate so much when we think about certain grant funders as major donors. Because if you have a 5-person board of directors that make these decisions, or local community members who are on a grant review committee, if you are sending them periodic things, now maybe one or two interim, not a lot, you don't, but maybe it's a social media post. Maybe it's something that a TV program, a TV highlight news about your organization that had to do with what they funded. Pass those things along in the moment. That's gold. Um, Arnold, you asked about grant management software. Clearly, Shaylee just went through Instrumentl. Um, there are a lot of other ones out there, and honestly, they all have good demonstrations, videos, and you really need to just, I would Google them and go in and see which ones meet your organization. Oh, yeah, we are at 2 o'clock. Anything, Shaylee, that you need to hop in on? I can keep going.
Nothing specific. I just wanted to make sure that we got to say thank you to you and that you got to highlight some of the great resources that you've put together for the folks in the room today before they all hopped off.
Yeah, thank you. I would love it. If you're interested, please, I'm happy to hang on because there's 3 more questions I was going to address, 2 more
Please.
that are really important. But I do have this grant resource, a free resource. If you go onto my webpage, scroll all the way down on my first page, you can sign up for that. And then also you can click into my Confident Grant Writer Learning Cohort page just to see what I offer there, and would love to talk with any of you. 2 important questions. One was around tracking awarded funding. That is a bugger, unfortunately, in a lot of accounting systems. Now, in QuickBooks, I did have a client that used grant funders as a vendor. And so as they spent down things, they could track it within the vendor in QuickBooks. You'd have to ask your accountant or bookkeeper about those. I love that some grant management software does account for spend down. It's hard. It is just, unfortunately, it's just hard. Others will use like a tag or a flag in the accounting software and then have to run a report by that tag or flag. And then that will help them to create those spend down reports. The final thing both Arnold and Lynn asked was project management program teams. How do they feel about you developing these templates and these guides? I would definitely take this to them and say, hey, this is a problem we have. What are the things that we have are already using? Are there systems? Are there templates? Are there guides? Are there, Google Docs, whatever they like to use? And to say, here's what we want to accomplish. Here's what this looks like. I would say use a team approach. In general, I haven't had a problem with other folks like project management or program teams. Um, having a problem with developing these templates and guidelines. As long as you go to them with, here's the problem that we need to solve. Here's a solution I think that could work for us. Can you help us? The one organization that we're using Microsoft Planner for, that actually came from the IT person to say, I think that this could be really valuable and here's how we can use it. So, and that was around renewals. That was around repeated missed reporting deadlines. So definitely folks in your team want to be able to work with you. We've gone a couple minutes over, but anything else that is anybody still on that we want to chat about?
Definitely. It looks like we actually have 70 folks with this. So it seems like Anne's willing to give us a couple of extra minutes. So we'd love to have folks ask any last questions. But before you go, I've dropped a LinkedIn chat or LinkedIn post in the chat. We'd love to have your comments and some love for Anne, share some love for Anne on LinkedIn, just so that we can really spotlight all of the expertise and all of the great grant management tips she shared for us. So I'll reshare that post in the chat. And again, would love to hear about what you folks learned from Anne today. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'll also quickly drop in an RSVP for our upcoming events. We've got a few really exciting events. So we've got Align to Win, which is a workshop with Charmaine Jackson, who will walk us through how you can demonstrate internal alignment to win more funding. So kind of similar, kind of touches on some of the stuff Anne talked about today. And second, we're hosting an extended workshop that will really touch on what Anne mentioned today, which is a pro level post award playbook. So, yeah, just a couple of extra resources I want to share. But with that, I'll let you folks go. I love seeing all this love for Anne. I thought this presentation was really, really, really wonderful. Awesome. See you, folks.